Soft music moved through the hotel lobby like a slow tide, and the light from tall windows painted the marble in bands of late-afternoon gold. Norah stood by the coat check with a bad rental dress, a borrowed purse, and a pulse that felt too loud. She was not supposed to be at the charity gala, but the invitation was a lie they had printed for her, and tonight she wore it like a fragile shield. People flowed around her in practiced clusters, laughing and trading names like gold coins. Norah watched them for a second, and then turned her attention to the far side of the room, where she had promised she would not look. Evan Garrett stood near the stage, his smile the kind that had once convinced her of forever. Tonight, he wore confidence like armor. Beside him was a woman in a red dress who leaned in too close, her voice full of small, sharp jokes. The sight burned cold across Norah's ribs. Marta. Her friend, and an expert at calm voices, squeezed Norah's hand once and mouthed a plan that had sounded better in the taxi. "Stay," Marta whispered, eyes steady. "We came for the meeting, and nothing else." Out. She had come because a client had offered a chance at a new project. She had not been brave enough to say no, even though the last time. She had seen Evan. It had felt like a bruise reopening. The room hummed. Someone clinked a glass. Norah had practiced breathing before she left the house, but breathing had no power when someone you had loved decided to show up like a judge. She felt herself shrinking into the rented fabric of the dress. Then she saw him. He was by the west window, a dark silhouette against the city, face tilted so he watched the crowd and nobody in particular. He did not belong to any small talk, nor did he attempt to merge with the laughter or the applause. His posture suggested a person who understood rooms but refused to be owned by them. Something about the calm in his chest made Norah take a step forward. Marta followed and kept her face neutral. "You do not have to do this," she said quietly. Norah offered a smile that did not reach her eyes. "I can leave," she answered, but both of them knew it was not what she wanted. The idea that she could stand under the chandeliers and speak, without fear, felt as foreign as walking on water. She reached him. "Excuse me?" she whispered, which was ridiculous because in a room full of noise the whisper landed with the force of a shout. He turned slowly. His eyes were cool, the color of river stones. No familiar flicker of recognition crossed his face. He had the kind of face that suggested many people had tried to read it and failed. "I need a favor," Norah said without preamble. The sentence felt like a small stone thrown into deep water. "Pretend to be my boyfriend for 10 minutes. Just long enough for me to get to the stage and speak, and to leave if he comes close." The words came faster than she expected. She had rehearsed nothing except this plea. He watched her for a moment that stretched. People around them moved and laughed, and the sound pooled between the two of them. Finally, he said, 10 minutes, then one condition. His voice was even and careful, as if he liked his words to be precise. Norah's heart hit something inside her like a bell. "Anything," she said. She meant it then, even if she might not mean everything he would ask. He extended his arm. His hand was steady when it closed around hers, and the touch felt like the anchor of a ship finding a harbor. They walked together into the center of the room. When Evan's gaze landed on them, something like ownership flickered and then faltered. The woman in red fixed her smile, but the loops of it felt fragile now. The CEO introduced himself quietly as Caspian Vale. He did not offer a flood of explanations about his days or his past. He only said, "Norah Reed, may I?" And when she allowed it, he held her hand like a polite lie turned into a small true thing. They moved through the crowd with a practiced ease that belonged to people who had learned how to be seen on purpose. Caspian's manner behind her was calm and intentional, a shield that repelled the usual comments, the whispers, the looks. Evan hesitated. The presence of a man beside Norah changed the geometry of the room. She felt it in the shift of glances, the way conversations folded. After 5 minutes, the pause ended, and Evan attempted to speak. But the tone in Caspian's voice when he said "Norah is with me tonight" held no invitation for argument. Evan's face tightened. He stepped back, and the crowd moved on. It was nothing like a battle, and everything like a small victory. They left the ballroom after 10 minutes. In the cool marble corridor, the moment they had agreed upon became a question. Norah felt foolish and grateful at once. "I should pay you," she said. "I have nothing but coffee and overdue bills." Caspian shook his head. "I asked for one condition," he reminded her. His eyes were not harsh. They were a quiet paperweight. Norah braced for something dramatic. "Tell me who you really are," he said. The sentence was strange. She thought it meant he wanted a name or a job title, but he shook his head again and said, "I meant who is Norah Reed when the light is not flattering and when the applause fades. Who is the woman who writes code at midnight, who keeps other people's dreams alive in basements?" Norah could have laughed at the coincidence. She had never told anyone at the gala about the spare life she kept downstairs. The nights when she fed her idea into a machine she called Lumen and whispered to it like a friend. She said nothing at first because she did not expect a stranger to care about the secret parts. "That is not a fair question for 10 minutes, she said finally. Caspian smiled. A small tilt that suggested he enjoyed being inconveniently precise. "You asked for 10 minutes?" he said. "I asked for the truth." The corridor was a private thing then, a narrow world away from the crowd. Norah felt the weight of her own story pressing at the seams of her chest. Telling it out loud felt dangerous, but remaining small felt worse. She took a breath and began. She spoke quietly about the basement work. The charity that had invited her because of a portfolio they had misread. The unpaid bills, the reason she had stayed when leaving seemed easier. The words spilled faster than she expected, and with each sentence the corners of her mouth softened. Caspian listened without interruption. His presence felt less like an audience and more like someone handing her a light when the power went out. When she finished, he nodded as if a puzzle had solved itself. "So you make things that learn people," he said. "You keep trying when the rest of the world calls it quitting." Norah's throat tightened. "I do my best," she said. "Then keep doing it," Caspian said. "And if you ever need someone to stand in a room while you speak the truth, tell me." The offer sounded strangely personal for a man who had just held the role of stranger enough. To make the story work, they walked back into the lobby with a different rhythm. Norah felt lighter in a way she had not expected. The borrowed arm beside her was still an arrangement, but a different kind of bargain had been made. She had asked for safety and been given the chance to speak. She had asked for 10 minutes and had been offered a place at a table where someone listened. Out in the night, the city lights spread like an invitation. Norah did not know Caspian's motives. She did not know if she would see him again. She only knew that, for the first time in a long while, she had left a room without feeling small. That alone felt like the beginning of something brave. The next morning began with rain that sounded like static against the city's glass bones. Norah sat by her small apartment window, a chipped mug warming her hands. Watching drops streak down and dissolve into the traffic below. Last night felt half imaginary. She replayed moments from the gala, the way Caspian Vale's voice had sounded like gravity when everything else was noise. She barely knew him. He had given her protection for 10 minutes and asked for the truth as if he already understood its shape. Her laptop chimed. A message blinked from Marta. "You disappeared." "Did you faint or elope?" Norah smiled at the screen and typed, "Neither. Survived. We'll explain later." She didn't add the part about Caspian because some things were too strange to put into text. At the office basement, the air was the same gray hum it always was, machines breathing. Fluorescent lights flickering like tired thoughts. Norah slipped into her chair and woke her monitor. The unfinished code for Lumen waited on her screen. A digital secret she'd been building for almost a year. She was halfway through debugging. When the elevator doors upstairs opened, unusual, nobody important ever came down to the basement floor. Voices murmured, shoes echoed. When she looked up, Marta was standing near the vending machine, frozen mid-bite of a granola bar. Beside her was a tall figure in a dark coat, unmistakable even without the formal glow of the gala lights. Caspian veiled for a heartbeat. Norah forgot how to move. He looked impossibly out of place among the old cables and the cracked tiles, like a polished statue misplaced in a museum storage room. "You found me," she said softly. "I said you could call me," he replied, stepping closer, his tone steady. "You didn't, so I thought I'd return the favor." Marta's eyebrows practically launched off her forehead. You know, Mr. Vale? She mouthed, backing toward the stairs. Norah gave a helpless shrug. Caspian's eyes scanned the room, then landed on the rows of code across her screen. So this is where you build what you talked about, he said. Lumen. Her pulse tripped. How did you... You mentioned it when you told me the truth last night, he said. I listened. He moved closer to the monitor, hands behind his back. You're running predictive modeling off behavioral patterns. Ethical machine learning. Not bad, Norah blinked, startled. You understand code? Understanding is useful when you invest in people who write it, he said. She felt heat rise in her cheeks. You're here because you want to invest? He shook his head slowly. I'm here because you intrigued me. The way he said it wasn't flirtation, it was observation. Like he was studying a complex equation and she was one of the unknowns. He leaned against her desk, gaze steady. I want to offer you a proposal. You'll work on Lumen with full resources, a small team, and freedom. In return, you'll do it under my company's wing. My condition is simply, let me learn from what you build. Norah's fingers curled around the edge of the desk. Learn how? How something human can exist inside code without losing itself, he said. The room fell quiet. Outside, rain hit the glass harder, as if listening. Norah didn't trust things that came easy, and nothing about Caspian Vale looked like coincidence. Why me? She asked. You could hire 100 developers with better resumes. His answer came after a long pause. Because they'd sell me what they think I want. You gave me truth, instead. The words slipped past her guard before she could stop them. Truth doesn't always build trust, no, Caspian agreed. But it's where trust begins. For reasons she couldn't name, that was enough. By afternoon, Norah found herself in a quiet office, 2 floors above ground, her name temporarily added to a project. Folder labeled Adaptive AI. Lena Park, a quiet data scientist, and Raphael Sims, Caspian's longtime strategist, joined her. Raphael smiled like someone who had seen too many people underestimate themselves. Mr. Vale doesn't often bring outsiders in, he said, shaking her hand. You must have done something unusual. I just asked him to pretend to be my boyfriend, Norah said, before realizing how absurd that sounded. Lena choked on her coffee. Caspian appeared at the doorway, expression unreadable. Unusual, yes, he said evenly, but effective. Over the next weeks, Norah lost herself in lines of logic and long nights that blurred together. Lumen began to breathe differently under her hands, shifting from simple response models to something that learned emotion through language. She would feed it fragments of her own journal, not because it needed them, but because she wanted to see if empathy could be taught through imperfection. Sometimes, Caspian would stand by her desk quietly, watching the progress bar crawl. He never interfered, just asked small, sharp questions like, what does it feel like to teach something to feel? Norah never had the right answer. She only knew it felt both dangerous and sacred. Yet the more she worked, the more she realized Caspian's calmness hid something colder. He avoided personal details, operated with precision that bordered on isolation. He was a man built out of rules, not warmth. One evening, when the office emptied, she asked him softly, Is that why you helped me at the gala? Because it looked efficient? He looked up from the file he was reading. Because you looked like someone who wanted to stay invisible and didn't deserve to be. The honesty in his tone made her chest tighten. Still, Norah knew something lingered behind his measured words. A reason for his detachment. One night, Raphael told her quietly, he built everything from nothing after losing almost everyone he trusted. Now he keeps people close enough to work but far enough not to hurt. The explanation shouldn't have mattered, but it did. She began to see the small cracks, how Caspian would linger outside meetings longer than necessary, how his hand would hover near the door as if uncertain about staying. She thought about that as she watched Lumen respond to her typed question one night. She asked it, Can people who build walls ever learn to feel again? The screen blinked once before the system replied, Only when someone stops trying to climb over them and starts waiting at the gate. She stared at the text for a long time, and when Caspian stepped quietly behind her, she didn't turn right away. She only said, What if your condition was never about the project at all? He didn't deny it, He just said, "Then maybe we're both experiments, waiting to see what happens next." The rain outside had stopped, but Norah knew something much larger had begun. Months later, the office lights burned soft and steady as winter pressed against the windows. Lumen was alive now, capable of analyzing emotion through tone and phrasing with an accuracy no one predicted. Norah felt proud and terrified in equal measure. She'd built something that could understand loneliness. And yet she was still learning to understand her own. Marta visited one evening with coffee and half a grin. "You look like a ghost," she said. "Does the mysterious CEO feed his engineers?" Norah laughed for the first time in days. "He tries. Mostly through meetings and silent looks," Marta said. The language of repression. Their laughter echoed against the glass, and for a while it felt simple again. Two friends and an impossible dream coming true. Later that week, Caspian called her into the rooftop office, where the city's skyline spilled like light through glass. He stood by the window, same calm posture, but his eyes carried a different kind of weight. "We've done it," he said. "Investors want a demonstration, but they want control transferred to the board immediately after." Norah's stomach dropped. "Control? They'll commercialize it, twist it." "I know," Caspian said quietly. "That's why I'm not giving them the real version." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "You'll keep the authentic Lumen. We'll present a limited model. You'll continue refining it under a private division." It was reckless. It was dangerous. And it was the most human thing he'd ever said. "Why risk everything for me?" she whispered. His eyes softened just slightly. "Because you reminded me what risk feels like. I built walls to survive. You built something that made me want to live." The room seemed to breathe differently then. The presentation came and went. Caspian faced the board with a poise that disguised rebellion. The staged version of Lumen impressed them. Nobody noticed the quiet file that never left Norah's encrypted drive. Afterward, they stood alone in the empty office. Norah turned to him. "So, was that your final condition?" He shook his head. "No. The real bargain was that we both learned to stop pretending." She smiled, tired and bright all at once. "Pretending what?" "That we're just saving each other for 10 minutes. That quiet, the distance between them finally dissolved, not with grand gestures, but with the stillness of understanding." She realized then that the story she'd begun in panic had become something deeper, something patient. The city stretched below, endless and alive. Norah looked at Caspian and felt no fear in the truth anymore. "Then let's build something honest," she said. He nodded once. Together, for the first time in either of their lives, that word didn't sound like a condition. It sounded like a promise.